Welcome to Whispers from Within. I'm your host, Katja Aurora, intuitive healer, space holder, and inner wisdom guide, here to share insights from a lifetime of walking between worlds. This is the sacred space where intuition leads, the soul speaks, and ancient wisdom meets everyday life. In each episode, we explore energy, healing, and the human experience, guided by presence, truth, and laughter. Let's listen in and remember who we really are.
I stand in the light of truth and love, whole, sovereign, and free. Only what serves the highest good may enter this space, all else dissolves into light. Every word shared here is carried in clarity, purity, and love. May each listener hear exactly what serves their highest evolution in perfect timing and perfect resonance. This space is sealed, protected, and blessed, and so it is.
Welcome. So, this is the first episode of my new podcast, which I didn't plan to do. I never wanted to be one of many. And yet, I find myself being able to convey what's inside of me in voice the best. So, I don't tend to write a lot. I do speak a lot, and it tends to come out in this way the best that it can be. And I'm not even sure what will come out in this podcast, to be honest. I'm just on an adventure, discovering myself and making sense of the world around me and deepening my knowledge about how things work and how they all come together in my own life and my own experience. And I'm here to share some of those things that I've experienced so far. And maybe it's a good place to begin to talk about my journey so that you get to know me a little bit more. I don't often talk about this, especially not in my healing work, because I feel like when I do my healings and my sacred spaces, it's not about me, it's about the healing in the room. And so I tend to keep that side of things a little bit more private. I am a little bit of a hermit. I need time by myself and time to reflect. And so you see me disappear for a while and then I come back with renewed strength and more wisdom that I have, yeah, that I've gone into when I disappeared. And excuse me if I sometimes don't find a word. I am German originally, and I was born behind the German Wall in 1980 and grew up for the first 9 years of my life behind the wall, which is ironic to say that because really the wall was around the west of Berlin. So it wasn't around the east, it was around the west of Berlin. So they were encapsulated, but they were obviously the free ones that were allowed to go anywhere they pleased. And we on the other side of the wall, yet in the greater part of the eastern German side, were the ones that were not allowed to go anywhere. But I was a child, so I didn't know all of that stuff, and I certainly didn't know that it was a world thing going on. For me, it was a local affair very much, and it was just what I knew. I didn't know any different, so I did not feel I was encapsulated in any way. I felt very safe. I had a very structured way of being in the East. It was a very militarized environment, but it was safe. And so I had a lot of time on the streets. I was roaming the streets. I had rollerblades that I went out with all the time. The roads were not very busy because not many people had cars, and if they had cars, they were like Trabants or Wartburgs. So not the most pleasing ones, but there weren't many. And so the roads were free for us children to use. And that's what we did. So we met up on the streets and then just played. And I grew up in a in the suburbs of Berlin. Outside of Berlin, it was a uh, yeah, very green area. with lots of forest around. I was always in the forest. And I was a very quiet child, very unsure of myself. I didn't have many friends. And every time I got friends and took them home, they were criticized by my parents. They were not good enough for me. And so I was I was always very unsure about whom to be with, and yeah, had trouble making friends basically. I was always feeling older than I was. Mm, didn't understand many things that my peers in my age group did. I felt always like the odd one out. And I think this is something that you might recognize in yourself if you're listening to this. So we came here not to fit in, but obviously at the time you try and fit in. You try your very best to be not the odd one out, but actually try to fit in. And I tried that miserably. I did not get very far with that. I was very dull in my early years. I had to wear glasses. I couldn't see far, so I had to wear glasses from the age of 6, and they were very ugly glasses. And yeah, we didn't have very, the clothes I wore weren't really pretty and very strange. And so I was an ugly duckling, so to speak. And I never felt like something special. And so I often had I went to school with my bike, so we weren't brought to school by our parents. We had to go by ourselves, and it wasn't a long way for me. It was like 15 minutes walk, I think, or about that. And I took my bike to school. Um, and I was lucky to have a bike even because that was quite a luxury to have in the East, where we had to wait for certain things. Like if you wanted a telephone, you had to wait 5 years. If you wanted a car, you had to wait 10 years for the car. I didn't know all this by the time, by the at the time, but yeah, that's how it was there. So, but that was normal, right? Everybody had to had to do the same. So we didn't feel like we were missing out on anything. And the things that we did have, we did share. So the community feel was much more close knit. Everybody was helping out, and we were made do with what we had. So we were very inventive in terms of um, yeah, just making something out of nothing, and that actually stays with me to this day. So this is very that was very uh, yeah, important to me, and it just stuck with me to this day. So yeah, when I went to school, because I was a very good student. I tried to, be the good girl, and that was the only thing I had because I didn't have friends. So I, put my time and effort into learning, and I loved school. I didn't mind school at all. I loved learning. I loved to explore, especially the subjects where the teachers were nice. I had an interest, and then if I had a personal connection to the teacher, I would be really good in that subject. And so, really enjoyed that. Was very versatile. Had lots of different interests. Nothing particular standing out to me. So, yeah, there were times when my mates in school, or not mates, let the air out of my tires, or put a hole in my tires. So there was many a time that I had to walk home with my bike and had to learn how to repair my bike, because it happened so many times. So there was a certain level of bullying going on just because I was so dull, and I didn't know how to be any different and to be special or cool or anything. I was just a very dull human being. And as it turns out, that is also one thing that is in my human design. And you might hear me speak about human design quite a bit in this podcast because this is one of my specialities and one of my passions that you can never never stop learning about. There's so much you can learn from human design, and I'm still in the process of diving deeper into my setup, my design. And this is where I started out. This is where I started my journey. It's the Gene Key 15. And yeah, it's dullness in the shadow. And that's what was all around me. And I didn't know that at the time, but that was very much what it felt like. It was the ugly duckling that then eventually begins to blossom into the swan. And I feel like I'm getting closer to the swan stage now, even though, that's not the goal. It's just happened this way. And so, yeah, my childhood was very safe. I felt very much, this is also where the naivety comes in because there was no dangers on the roads. Apart from the traffic, if you didn't pay attention. I had one classmate that was killed by crossing the road. And that stuck with me as well. But, generally speaking, it was very safe. I was allowed to visit my grandma in a place half an hour from our place by car. I went there by bus by myself with 9 years old. And as the wall came down, I was no longer allowed to do that. And I didn't understand that at the time, because suddenly everything changed. Everything changed. I could feel the anxiety in my parents. They didn't know any different. They grew up in the Eastern world as well, the Eastern German world, and didn't know any different. They had a very um, future set out for them. In their life was kind of done for them. They just had to follow the path. And suddenly that path was interrupted by the war coming down. They were not pleased about that. They were definitely not pleased about that. They were not happy that the war came down. And it was hilarious because at the night on the night that the war came down, we were celebrating my grandpa's birthday. So we didn't even notice that the war came down. Hilarious. And so we celebrated, and as usual, we were dancing, we were having a really good time, and as we then went to bed, and then in the morning we noticed, oh, something is different, and everybody's talking about the war coming down, and we didn't actually believe that because how can that be true? Like never happened before. How can that be true? So then my parents and my sister and I, younger sister, we went to Berlin and. We wanted to explore what's happened. And then the trains stopped going, and we had to walk all the way back home. And our home was in the north of Berlin, outside of Berlin. It was the suburbs. It was really quite far out of the center. Like if you took the train into town, it would take like half an hour to 45 minutes to the center of Berlin with the train. So we had to walk quite a long time. And I was 9 years old, right? It seemed like forever we were walking and we were quite scared. There were no taxis, or if there had been any, we wouldn't be able to afford them. So we had to walk. And I remember the walk, and I remember, asking my parents, how far do we have to still walk? And by the time we went home, we were just absolutely, absolutely shattered. And my mum and dad at the time were really scared not to be able to get back home because they had heard the stories of how the war was built in the first place. In 1951, the wall was built. They were not born at that point yet, but they had heard the stories. It was built in one day and it separated families. So there were people that went to work in the west of Berlin, and they couldn't return home because they built the wall in one day. And so it separated families in one day, and that could not be rectified. And yeah, it was quite traumatic for some families. And my parents knew that story. They were quite uh yeah, they had fear that this could happen again, that they would put up the borders again, and we might still be in the West and couldn't get back. So this was all. It was very interesting, and I just could feel the nerves of my parents. I was a very sensitive child, very quiet, and picked up on lots of things. And I always, well, now looking back, I know that I kind of seemed to be the Hoover, the energetic Hoover of everything that went on in my family. I kind of absorbed the energies and transformed them in me, but I didn't know I was doing that. But it was very hard on my system because there was so much of it at the time. Um, and I went even quieter than I was already. Um, so yeah, that was my upbringing. And the other thing I remember, and I think, when you listen to my talk about the time behind the German Wall, um, yeah, it was that we were there was a system called the Pioneers, um, which is a similar thing to the Scouts in England. We would go away for a few nights, have like camping and do certain things to learn how to be in the wild, how to observe the animal kingdom, the plants, and we were also taught in that kind of system how to look after the elderly, how to collect recycling from households. It was quite a good system because it taught us how to be social, um, and there was a lot of values imparted through that system. So there was good things in there, but it was also very military based. So we had pals, um, like assemblies uh, in the schoolyard almost every week, and had to wear a uniform with a coloured it, scarf. And there were different colors for different age groups. And I had the blue scarf. This was the beginning. So when you got into school, you got the blue scarf, and then you worked your way up, and you got then the red scarf. And I was just about to get my red scarf, and then the wall came down, and I never got my red scarf. And I was so cross about that as well. I didn't understand it. So yeah, to this day, I'm waiting for this red scarf. Never mind. So that is what I remember from the East. I'm very grateful to have been brought up in that system. It wasn't all bad. The things I remember the most was the close-knit community. So family was everything for us. Friends were everything for us. We shared a lot. Even though I didn't have close friends in my childhood, I felt like the family and the friends of the family were quite close-knit. So I did feel quite looked after and safe in that environment. Um, but yeah, I had certainly had relationship issues at the time, and I didn't know where that came from. That only revealed itself later on. So then the time of struggle began when my parents had to completely reinvent themselves. My mum was a child carer in the East. She then changed her profession to become a beautician, and had to learn from scratch, and then had to begin her own business. My dad was an architect, very used to being employed and building the box standard houses that the East produced, very ugly, square buildings, and very confined in, the creativity, even though he was very creative and he is a very creative man, but he was very stifled in that, and he got used to that. And then he had to also go his own way. He was made redundant from the place that he was working in because they had to close the doors. And he then made himself, became a self-employed person, having to learn the ropes of capitalism, having to learn about competition, which we never had in the East. There was no competition in the industries. We got the contracts because they were given out, so you didn't have to compete much in the East, in the Eastern um, economy. So he was very naive when starting out, made a lot of mistakes, and we struggled. We struggled a lot in the first 5 years after the wall came down. We struggled a lot. We had a lot of issues with money. That was always a theme in my family, and that's continuing to be a theme in my life. The money piece. I'm still working through that. But yeah, it's like it's a whole it was a whole different world that appeared, and that also enabled me then in going out into the world. I had English at school, which was not worth much because you only learn the phrases that you normally learn, like where's the next station and can I buy a sandwich or something? There's those standard box standard things that you learn in school where the filling words are all missing and you can't really speak a proper sentence. Um, I had 9 years of English. I was quite good in that. but yeah, it didn't really give me much in terms of how to speak the language properly. So then I struggled to find a profession. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was very good with boys. I had more close-knit relationships to boys later on in my school years than to girls. I felt more masculine than feminine, to be honest. I wasn't a girly girl. And I always thought like the girls were talking about these weird things like, which nail polish to wear and which dress to. And all of that didn't really interest me at all. And I found that so not important. And so I stuck with the boys who talked about metaphysics and, these other things that were much more interesting to me at the time. And so I ended up having maths and physics as my main subjects when in the later years of my school years, and was in a class with only three girls and a lot of boys. And I felt really at home there. And I had a teacher that really was supporting us and learning more about physics. And I was really interested in that because the teacher could explain it so well. I was really lucky with that. So I did a lot of research into metaphysics. I read books about metaphysics. Erich von Däniken is one of them that I read. You might not know him, but that was one that I really looked into. I researched Stephen Hawking's and the theories there, and Einstein, and all of the things. I was really interested in that and wanted to understand about the universe more. So that was me coming out of school, and then I got a scholarship to study computer science. And I had a very ordered brain, so I was good with numbers and good with structures, and so coding came quite naturally to me. So I did the study. It was a scholarship with Siemens, and that was quite prestigious. So I had to, was a lot of pressure on me to make it work and to use that opportunity to become somebody. But it was really hard, and the studying really didn't come naturally to me. That the whole system of being in your university and getting into all the theory of it, these just very abstract ways of thinking. That wasn't my stuff at all. It was so removed from reality, I found, that I couldn't get much out of that. I didn't really like it at all. And because of the pressure from the outside and my parents being really proud of me having that scholarship, having earned that scholarship, I stuck with it for 19 months, and then I couldn't. I couldn't anymore. I could not pretend that I liked it. It was sucking the life force out of me. I was so bored with it. They didn't even teach us how to switch on a computer. I mean, yes, it's very easy to do that, but we didn't even get to see how to do that and how to put the components of a computer together. It was all theory. And I thought, well, if I don't even know how to use it practically, what is this all for? That was my thinking. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy it at all. It was useful in the end. So it transpires when I look back on my life, all of that was part of me finding myself. And there were certain elements of it that really helped me in my personality and how I, yeah, then went on being. So then I had another few odysseys that never ended anywhere. And yeah, then I got back as a child. I've always had a really good relationship to nature. I was often in the forest by myself, speaking to the trees and the plants. And I loved the trees in the forest that I grew up in. And very early on, I also spoke to the nature spirits. I knew there were nature spirits around me, and I had friends, imaginary friends, as my mom called them, imaginary friends around me. And I was often out there by myself, listening to the wind, listening to the noises in nature, and just really enjoying being grounded, even though I didn't know what that even meant. And I remembered that connection. And at some point in my adolescence, I was told magic is not real. And I can't even remember who it was that told me this, but it kind of very harshly got me that magic was not real and that I had to grow up and, just see the real world. And I did. I completely disregarded magic as being not, yeah, it was not real anymore for me from that moment on. And so I shut it out. I shut it out. I shut the knowing about it out, even though was always very connected and always felt that there was a truth in that. But then being told by an adult that it wasn't hit me quite hard, but I believed it. So magic wasn't real anymore for me. And when I was around the age of 24, I began to open up to that again. I thought there must be something else here other than me just going to work and having to work for money and then coming home and sleeping and eating and sleeping and then doing the same again the next day. There must be something more than that. I must have another reason for being than just that. So I remembered the books in my mum's room. She had a lot of metaphysical books and books on Reiki and other energy healing and psychology. And I was always very interested in that. I read a lot of those books early on. She hadn't read them. We had the books. So the books were all there for me. And I read them. So I remember that. And then I looked up Reiki and found somebody in my hometown that was giving initiations into Reiki. So I went and got the first initiation into Reiki. And she talked about crystals and she talked about nature spirits and she talked about the connection to source. And so opened up all of the things that I had shut down for a long time. And I was suddenly seeing things with new eyes again. And at the time, I was also preparing for moving to Ireland because the economy in Berlin was really, really bad. It was really difficult to find a job, really difficult to earn money. I was waitressing. I really loved the waitressing because I could make people happy in a very easy way. Always a people person. Somehow I always thrived in relationships, but then had to have periods where I had to retreat and be with myself only. But yeah, so the waitressing was wonderful for me. And I had found a family run restaurant in Berlin that I was waitressing at and they loved me. Um, and so I was thriving there. I had, there were places in my or periods in my life where I met people that were supporting me and saw more in me than I did and pushed me onwards. So this family was one of those, and they were really supportive. In me preparing to move to Ireland. I went to a course for 3 months to learn vocabulary to be a waitress and to also learn how to apply for a job in English. And after those 3 months, I then applied for a job in Ireland and I went to Ireland. And then my adventure began. So my initiation into Reiki was just before that journey. I think it was sometime in the end of 2004 that I had my first Reiki initiation, so more than 20 years ago now. And I went to Ireland in March 2005. Yeah, and I went to Ireland with the idea that there would be a lot of spiritual people there, 'cause I have heard a lot about Ireland, and I've heard that there's a lot of nature spirits there, and there must be spiritual people, and that was my intention to go to Ireland for, as well as being able to earn money, more money than I had earned in Germany or in Berlin at the time. So I went to Ireland, and within the first half a year, I went through many trials and tribulations. You can read most of it on my website if you feel inclined to read my story there. It's a bit more comprised and a bit more, not so long-winded like I'm talking here now. But in Ireland, the first half a year, nothing happened. I just worked and ate and slept with the same scenario as in Berlin. And I thought, why is this happening? Why is there nothing opening up? And I was just about to give up on, meeting anybody spiritual or having any spiritual connections anywhere. And I was thinking, oh, should I go back home now? Because if there's nothing here for me and nothing has opened up. So I was just about to throw in the towel, as you say. And in that moment, I met somebody. So I wasn't normally somebody that went out. I didn't like clubbing, as they called it. I was not a clubber. I never drank a lot. I was never drunk in my life. Just not because I had a fear of it or anything. It didn't give me anything. So I never was drawn to drink a lot. And one wine glass would make me tipsy. So I didn't never really. I could be tipsy without the wine, I think, or without the drink. And I enjoyed myself much more then. So I didn't drink a lot. So clubbing and being with other people was quite something for me because I was so sensitive. So and the loud music was something I couldn't cope well with. But that one night I went out because in Ireland there wasn't much happening, and going out was something special. And a friend of mine went out, so I went with. And that night I met somebody in that uh, club that I looked at him, and the minute I looked at him, something like a lightning bolt went through my body, and I've never experienced that before. It was so profound and so well. I was very curious about it because it was so out of the ordinary and so unexpected that I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was happening. It wasn't like love at first sight. It wasn't like that. It was like a remembering of that person and seeing them, and that just hit me like a lightning bolt. And it must have been similar to him as at the time as well, but also with curiosity because we both hadn't experienced that before. So we met and we talked for quite a lot of that night. We were standing outside of the club because inside of the club you couldn't really talk much because you couldn't hear each other. So we went outside of the club and stood in front of it, and there were lots of other people around also talking on the road because there was not much traffic there. And yeah, we talked and we talked and we talked. It felt like a catching up on what had happened to us in this lifetime. Um, and he had a like recently done a shaman apprenticeship with somebody. So we were talking about that, and I couldn't believe that I had to go through half a year to meet somebody finally having to do anything with spirituality in Ireland. So I was really chuffed meeting person that I was meant to be meeting. And I knew I had to meet that person. I knew I had to find that in Ireland. I had that knowing that there was something there for me. And yet, I was almost like the day before I had thought, okay, I'm probably going to go back to Germany now because, nothing has happened in half a year, and surely by now I should have made a discovery, and I hadn't. So here it was. That was the discovery. So in that same night, I was out. I think it was my sister was with me as well, and there was another friend with me. And my sister and I, we, it was so weird as well at the same time. His parents or his mum had a farm with exotic animals close by. And in the middle of the night, and don't ask me why and how we got to it, but he took us back to the mum's farm and showed us the animals in the middle of the night. Very strange. But again, I was reminded of me sitting in the forest listening to the sounds of nature, and we did that in that night. We listened to the sounds of the animals, some of which were nocturnal, and there was a lot of sound in the air. There was no light pollution. As an island, there's not much light around. It was a clear sky. We had the stars above, and we were talking, and it just flowed. And so then eventually we went home. I think it must have been like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night, but we had arranged, he and I, we had arranged to meet again in the local stone circle. There was a stone circle in that place where I lived. It was in town, which was unheard of, but then we had a little stone circle in town. And this is where we would meet at around 8:30 or something in the morning. That's what we agreed. And we met there the next morning, and I hadn't slept, and I felt like so electrified. I had no energy deficiency or anything. I was just really alive, really, really, really alive. So we met in the stone circle, at the stone circle, going into the stone circle, then sat down in the circle, and we spoke the whole day long. I don't remember what day it was in the week, and there wasn't many visitors to the stone circle on that day, but we were just sitting there talking, 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 and we were talking about so many different things in our lives and our stories. And it was so easy and it was so wonderful. Just felt really elating. I just I can still remember the feeling I had being heard for the first time. Um, like truly heard, being truly understood beyond what I had experienced before. Um, on a soul level, I felt seen, and I think it must have been the same for him. So, both of us really resonating very deeply with what we had experienced, and there were so many similar experiences in our lives as well. There were obviously different scenarios, but the experiences were very similar, yet different. And he then paved the way for me to start my shaman apprenticeship, pre-Celtic shamanism with the woman that he was trained by. I started that through him, and this became quite an intense and very important relationship. So he became a really, really good friend of mine. And in all my time on Ireland, we had a lot of time together and did a lot of work together. Every time we came together, we kind of worked uh, on, you know, mm, well, I can't even put that into words. We worked on the metaphysical in a way. We wove a web of healing, um, and I can't even give you all the details now. But it was really profound for me that whole time learning his perspective of the world opened up my eyes, seeing the world from a different angle and opening up my worldview. And I'm sure that I've done exactly the same for him. So he saw the world through different eyes with me. So, and then I learned about music and lots of different things. It was really, yeah, really quite an interesting and profound time for me. It made me feel alive. I was truly alive, and I began to have communion with the nature spirits again. I was looking after a dog for somebody else, and so was often in the forest by myself. An island has not a lot of inhabitants, so when you go into nature, you mostly by yourself. You don't meet anybody necessarily unless you go to places that are well known or in town areas or something. If you're in nature there, you quite often have the whole day to yourself. Um, and I did that. I went into nature. I had really long walks with the dog, and I connected with the nature spirits. I got to know the gnomes and the fairies and the tree beings and spoke with them, and they became my friends. And yeah, so that's another section for another time. I think I'm gonna stop the recording here now. And we'll dive into other things soon. I'm not sure what the next theme will be, but maybe that's given you a little glimpse of my life early on and how I came to be, or how my journey as a healer began, because that's when it all became alive in me. I remembered that there was more to me than just going to work and eating and sleeping. And yeah, so Ireland kissed me awake, so to speak, and this is where it all began. And if you have any questions for me, please let me know. I think this will help me along the way. If you ask me questions, I kind of then also know what interests you, and I can give you the answers to that. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here. And I hope that you come again when I share with you next time. Bye bye. So here's a little add on. I was nudged to say that this is my guide speaking, by the way, helping me to navigate even this journey. That if you're listening to this and you have been part of my life from early childhood onwards, somewhere along the lines, and you felt we had a really close relationship, please know I'm telling the story from my perspective. It's nothing to do with you, it's my perspective. And I don't want to diminish what you felt, I don't want to offend you in any way. I just felt that in hindsight and looking back on my life, that at that time I was not able to trust fully, and therefore those relationships felt quite flat and quite labored to me. Um, but I didn't know that at the time. So if you feel in any shape or form triggered or stirred by what I was saying about my relationships early on, please know this is my perspective only. And if there was something there for you, you might need to do some work there. There might be something for you to discover if you are that way inclined. But I honor your perspective too, and that might be a completely different one. Just know this. Thank you for joining me on this journey inwards. May the whispers you heard today echo into your daily life, gently guiding, healing, and reminding you of who you truly are. If this episode stirred something in your heart, I invite you to follow, share, or leave a review. It helps the medicine reach those who need it most. And if you feel called to go deeper, connect with me. Until next time, stay rooted, stay open, and keep listening to the whispers from within.